Well, that was absolutely dreadful, but Myles Garrett is only one sack away from tying the NFL record, so at least I'm going home with something. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, the Cleveland Browns just played what was probably their worst game of the season. The lowest points they've had all year, and that is saying something, considering this team has only scored more than 17 points, only less than a handful of times. Pretty awful performance in a game that I don't think anyone expected to win, but still an awful performance nonetheless. Not going to spend too much time on this one because, this is clearly a team that is, if we're being honest, not too concerned about winning football games right now. I think a lot of those players are checked out. I think a lot of those players, the last thing they wanted to do today was be on that field in Chicago in minus 20 degrees Celsius, for anyone wondering what I was saying there, Fahrenheit or Celsius. The real way of measuring temperature, by the way. And, I don't think anyone wanted to be out there, so I'm not going to spend too long on this game, but obviously talk about it and obviously moving forward, etc., etc. The game started as bad as it can get, as most of these games seem to do. The very first play, Bubba Ventrone reminded us that he still has a job with the special teams on the opening kickoff, pretty much as they seem to on every kickoff return, every punt return, give up an easy 30, 40 yards. Just the coverage units are just so bad. And then the Browns offense starting their day on the 1 yard line, followed by a penalty which took it to the half-yard line. So obviously not a great start from the offense, and that pretty much signalled the day from what was going to be from this offense, which was pretty much non-existent. The team had one first down in the first half. We had 9 first downs in total compared to the Bears 21. So an absolutely dreadful day from the offense. Special teams, not any better, as has been the case all year from this offense and special teams. Don't get me wrong, the defense didn't exactly shower themselves in glory. They gave up 31 points in this game. They were good at spots. They didn't start well. They seemed to tighten up a little bit, played a lot better during the middle of this game, and then I suppose you can probably put down to the lack of output from the offense and them getting gassed by constantly being on the field, which led to them not finishing this game very well on defense. But obviously the special teams is not really much we can say. This is a special teams unit that, don't get me wrong, is devoid of talent. There's not really any good special teamers out there. There's no standout guy on special teams for this team. But the special teams coordinator is as bad as it gets, and Mike Prefer just got sacked by UNC, so if he wants his job back, then he was bad, but we didn't think it could be much worse, and it has been much, much worse. The offense obviously starts with, we entered this game with one of our starting offensive linemen from week 1 being Joel Bitonio. We had Casey Leviston and Cam Robinson as our tackles. We had Luke Whippler obviously as centre. This was a pretty... This offense is devoid of much talent anyway. It was devoid of much talent entering the season, but even in this game, they were even more so devoid of what little talent they did have on this offensive side of the ball. That, of course, didn't help, but, starting with the quarterback, obviously Shedeur, that's going to be the number one story from this game. Shedeur struggled in this game. How much of that was down to Shedeur? How much of that was down to bad offensive line play, bad just offense overall, bad coaching? Everyone can argue, and I'm sure will argue amongst themselves how much blame they can chalk up in the pie chart of to Shedeur, offense, lack of talent, etc., etc. But overall, not a great game for Shedeur. Had moments in this game, as he has in pretty much all of his starts, where he does show flashes of what make you think there is an NFL quarterback in there. Obviously, mainly being in those deep passes, those deep balls, specifically to Isaiah Bond. Shout out to Isaiah Bond, one of the only guys on offense doing themselves much grace in this game, and he's really starting to excel in that role as that deep threat. And whether it's Shedeur Sanders next year or a rookie QB, that is something that obviously the Browns can hopefully look to build on. And obviously Shedeur making those two connections, 40+ yard connections with him, you obviously like to see. And as I said, Shedeur showing flashes in this game that we have seen from him in all of his starts, but also showing some of the bad stuff as well. 3 interceptions overall. Obviously, the second interception was not Shedeur Sanders' fault in any shape or form. That was actually another great throw from Shedeur. That should have been a touchdown, but Jerry Jeudy needs to get his muscle up and just allowed the defender to take that ball away from him in what was a pretty embarrassing play from Jerry Jeudy, which obviously just continues his disaster of a season that he is having. But the other 2 interceptions were on Shedeur. The first one not seeing the linebacker, and then the second one thinking that he could float the ball over that defender and was unable to do so. So 2 not great interceptions, took some pretty bad sacks in this game as well, 5 sacks overall. So not a great game from Shedeur, but also it's hard to evaluate a rookie quarterback in the situation that he is in. As I said, we saw some flashes that we've seen, in all of these starts from him, which is, what gets some people excited, which has led to some people, as much as I can disagree with, believing that that's, they've seen enough and that we should build around Shedeur going forward as the quarterback. And you can see why they feel that way with some of the flashes that we see with him. But of course, still seeing some of those bad stuff as well. But again, how much of Shedeur's struggle in this game is down to Shedeur, how much of it is down to the offensive line, how much of it is down to having no wide receivers, how much of it is down to having, bad coaching as well. So, as I said, people can argue amongst themselves, how much blame they want to dish out amongst that. But as I said, overall offense just terrible day from the offense. This is the lowest amount of points we've scored all season, which is saying something. Had a chance at the end to make it look a little bit more respectable, and were unable to come through and obviously turn the ball over on downs and 4th downs, unable to get a touchdown with in the red zone at the end there. So not a great day at all from this offense. I feel bad for Quinshon Judkins at this point, because I can't really remember like a Browns rookie having to do more with less than Quinshon Judkins this year. I mean, he is literally running behind nothing. We are asking this guy to essentially block for himself and somehow create his own gaps. It's just a mess, and I'm just looking forward to seeing Quinshon Judkins with an actual NFL offensive line. I've seen enough from Quinshon Judkins this season. I've said this multiple times to know that he is a good running back. He is just not getting an opportunity and not being helped at all by his offensive line and by his offensive play caller. 12 carries, 21 yards in this game. His longest carry being 4 yards. I mean, the longest carry on the day was 15 yards from a Shedeur Sanders scramble. Including the running backs, Quinshon 4 yards, Trevion Williams 3 yards, and then Harold Fannin had a 2-yard run as well. So absolutely abysmal from this run game. And as I said, just an overall bad day. Thankfully, Harold Fannin got 7 receptions, so that I think that, don't hold me to this, but I think that means he's tied the record for most receptions by a rookie. He had, was it 59 going into this game, with the record being 66, so I'll have to double check that. But I'm pretty sure that means he has now tied the record. So shout out to Harold Fannin, who of course continues to show why we should be excited about him going forward. And that's really all we can take from this offense this season at all. Really, is just some of these rookies. Quinshon, I think we should be excited about going forward. Isaiah Bond, as I mentioned earlier, is really coming along and excelling in that role as a deep threat. Harold Fannin is a future tight end number 1 for this team. And obviously, as I said, we have seen some flashes from Shedeur Sanders that can get you excited, and you understand why people are excited about him. But of course, in my opinion, not seen enough to go. But this is the franchise quarterback going forward. But as I've said multiple times, I think it was going to be very hard for Shedeur Sanders to be able to do that because he was in such an unfair situation. Same with Dylan. I think both guys have been thrown into an unfair situation this year, essentially getting 6 games with a terrible offense to try and prove that you're a franchise quarterback. That's just, that's an almost impossible situation for any prospect, let alone a 3rd and a 5th round pick. So you have to completely understand and preference any talk about these rookies with that. In my opinion, you have to obviously understand that this was always going to be an unfair situation for them. They always had their backs against the walls, essentially, with what they were getting thrown into. But as I said, I'm impressed with some of the flashes that I've seen, but some of the bad stuff creeping back into his game in this game with the interceptions and the sacks as well. The defense, as I said, they didn't really do themselves that much grace in this game. Early on in this game, you had people already throwing out the jokes about, this defense can't travel, etc., etc. And you could understand that with how they were playing early on. As I mentioned earlier, they did kind of shore it up a little bit. They played better in the middle of this game. Second quarter, third quarter, they were much better. But overall, how much of it is down to the offense and how bad they were and constantly putting the defense back on the field? Probably quite a lot. But even with that being said, the defense wasn't great in this game. Gave up 361 yards, 31 points. As I said, they weren't exactly amazing. But, I mean, how many times have I said this season? That the least bad of the units in this game was the defense. And as I said, when you're constantly out there and your offense isn't really giving you a breather, there's not really much you can do. The Browns secondary was getting absolutely cooked in this game. Denzel Ward, you can see his impact on this team because the secondary was getting cooked. How much of that was down to Caleb Williams? Obviously, I'm a big Caleb Williams fan. Was a fan of him coming out. Still am a fan of him. He was great in this game. He showed you what a franchise quarterback looks like, in my opinion. That's what it looks like on the other side. And obviously he was able to kind of take apart that Browns secondary. And even when the Browns defensive line were able to get pressure, he was still able to come through. He only took 3 sacks in this game. He could have been sacked 6 times. Myles had 2 where he so nearly got to him, but Caleb was able to get the ball out. But speaking of Myles, of course, that is the one silver lining, the one solace I can take from this game is that Myles Garrett, 1.5 sacks, and let me just have my rant now because it should be 2 sacks. Myles should be 1 sack away from breaking the record, but the NFL want to be bitches about it and want to, every chance they get to shit on the Browns, decided to give him half a sack when Shelby Harris did absolutely fuck all. He basically fell over next to Caleb Williams and they somehow gave him half a sack for that. Myles gets 1.5 sacks in this game. I don't know if you can challenge that and get it changed. I remember TJ Watt trying to do it, so maybe you can. And hopefully the NFL can go back and look at that and change that and credit Myles with the full sack, which he fully deserves. And this is not me just saying this as a Browns fan, Myles fan moaning. That was a full sack for Myles, no matter if you're a Browns fan or not. But with that being said, obviously still 1.5 sacks in this game. I'm going home with something. I've been saying for the last 6 weeks now, my Super Bowl is Myles Garrett breaking the sack record, winning defensive player of the year. That is my Super Bowl. 1.5 sacks in this game. That takes him to 21.5 on the season, which is just so annoying with that half sack. Fuck you, NFL. But that means he's 1 sack away from tying the NFL record with, of course, Michael Strahan and TJ Watt being on 22.5, which is funny as well because Myles had a play in this game where Caleb fumbled the snap, fell on the ball, and Myles touches him, which, if anyone remembers Michael Strahan's record-breaking sack, was basically what he did with Brett Favre, only it wasn't a fumble. Brett Favre just fell down on the floor in front of him. I'm assuming it's because it was technically a fumbled snap is the reason why that doesn't count. But it is just funny that, Michael Strahan has the record for doing the same thing that Myles would have just equaled his record doing, but obviously that doesn't count, and rightfully so. It shouldn't count. I mean, Michael Strahan should have 21 and a half sacks, not 22 and a half, and but obviously it was just funny that obviously happened. But as I said, he's 1 sack away from tying the record, 1.5, 2 sacks from breaking it. We've got 3 games left. Obviously, the Bills next week. Josh Allen, who is prone to taking a few sacks. The Steelers game, will it be Aaron Rodgers or Mason Rudolph? We'll have to wait and see by that point. If it's Mason Rudolph, you'd obviously feel a lot better. And of course, Myles breaking the record, against the Steelers would just be the cherry on top and the best way to do it. Hopefully TJ Watt is back from his collapsed lung in that game to watch him. And I'm not saying that as a, that probably sounds like a joke kind of thing, but obviously, football is football. Rivalry in football is a rivalry in football. I obviously don't wish any harm on any Steelers player, especially TJ Watt. He is a great player, as much as I obviously make the jokes. He's not Myles Garrett, but he is a great player, and obviously hope that he has a speedy recovery and he's able to be back on the field as soon as possible. But we got 3 games to get 1.5 sacks. I keep saying it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I am getting slightly nervous as these games go, roll around and we get less and less games left in the season for him to break it. But, I mean, it's got to happen. We've got Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers / Mason Rudolph. If that's not enough to get 1.5 sacks, then maybe he doesn't deserve it. But hopefully he can get that. But that's pretty much the only takeaway from this defense, other than Carson Schlesinger. I said a few weeks ago that he is in pole position for Defensive Rookie of the Year, which is the other Super Bowl for me this season. All he has to do is just continue these games where he's having 10 plus tackles, and as long as none of these other rookies go out and have a 8 sack, 3 interception historic game, it's his award to win. And of course, again, leading the team in tackles. I think that's, we've played 14 games. I'd be surprised if it's not 12 games this season that Carson has led the team in tackles. So another 14 tackles, another day leading his team in tackles. That's just another argument for his Defensive Rookie of the Year campaign. And it's same with Myles. It's not just a matter of when if, it's a matter of when. With the sack record, I think it's the same with Carson Schlesinger when it comes to Defensive Rookie of the Year. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And obviously when will be when they announce the awards like they do every year, so that doesn't make as much sense of analogy, but you get what I mean. But overall, not really greatest day from the defense. Sam Kamara went down in this game, so hopefully he's okay. Mason Graham had a couple of nearly sacks in this game, as he does seem to have every game. Myles Harden kind of got cooked in this game. Diabate had a couple of nice plays, actually had 8 tackles in this game, 2 tackles for loss. But overall, not a great day from the defense, but how much can you ask them to do when they're on a 3-10 football team? They're playing in minus 20 degrees. Their offense can only score 3 points. There's only so much that you can expect from this team. But that was the game, and obviously the performances from these units. As I said, I don't want to waste too much time on it. We lost 31-3. We got thoroughly outclassed by a playoff team and a team that is 10-4. So, that is pretty as self-explanatory as it goes. But obviously, moving forward from this game, the Giants annoyingly lost. So did the Raiders. The Titans are currently playing. Obviously, I don't think anyone's expecting them to beat the 49ers. So the Browns didn't get too much help from the rest of the NFL in terms of their draft position. But, the Raiders still have to play the Giants. The Titans have got 4 games left to win 1 game. The Browns aren't winning another game this season. I think we've all kind of accepted that a couple of weeks ago. They're going to finish the year on 3 wins. So, as I said, the Raiders still play the Giants. That means one of them is going to get to 3 wins. The Browns obviously have the tiebreaker over every team this year because of the strength of schedule with the AFC North not being very good. So you need one Titans win, basically, and you've got a top 2 pick this year. Because, as I said, the Browns aren't going to win another game. So if that's the case, obviously the Browns will be in position to draft a quarterback. I know probably some in the fan base don't want to have this conversation, but as someone that talks about everything with the Cleveland Browns, and obviously something I've talked about in previous weeks, obviously I'm not going to not mention it. We didn't get a amazing performance from Shedeur today. Not that even an amazing performance would have stopped the Browns from doing it if they were in position. I just feel like, the Browns are probably going to end up with a top 2 pick. If Dante Moore declares, that means one of those 2 quarterbacks is theirs if they want them. I don't see them being in a situation where they pass on one of those guys if that is the case. And that's not even a knock on Shedeur by any means. As I've said multiple times, this was such an unfair situation for both rookies to come into and stop their team from drafting a quarterback. I don't think anything they could have done was going to stop them from doing that. And obviously, as I said, all it takes is one Titans win and the Browns are going to have a top 2 pick and be in that position to do so. Who knows, maybe even a couple wins elsewhere and they're in number 1 pick. So that's obviously the situation that we're going to be in. And as I said, I just don't see them passing up on one of those quarterbacks if they are in that situation. And that applies to whether they keep this coaching staff or not. The last couple of weeks I've maybe thought, I just think they don't actually care how bad this season gets. They're going to keep everyone anyway. I think they're 100% going to keep Andrew Berry. I think that's not even a discussion at this point. But with how bad it gets in some of these games, with the offense and with the whole team, even with me thinking that, I do think how can you justify and how can you make an argument for keeping this coaching staff? So, as I've said multiple weeks, I think I'm not going to be surprised if they sack the coaching staff. I'm not going to be shocked if they don't. But I think every time you get a performance like this, it makes you more in the camp of, I think that's something that they probably will more likely do. But either way, as I said, if they keep the coaching staff, then you've got a head coach who is more than on the hot seat. If he's got a top 2 pick with Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore there, he's taking one of those quarterbacks regardless. And then, vice versa, if you sack this coaching staff and you bring in a new coaching staff and they've got a top 2, top 3 pick to go and pick their own quarterback straight away to, kickstart their obviously thing is, as a coach here, they can pick their own quarterback. They're going to do that every single day of the week over, and over passing that up for the previous regime's 5th round pick. So I know, obviously, most people that want the Browns to build around Shedeur Sanders, most people that were Shedeur Sanders fans, obviously, before he was drafted to the Browns, etc., they want this coaching staff fired, which I completely understand. I'm not even remotely arguing against that. I don't think anyone can remotely argue against that. But I do just think you can't expect that to be the case and then a new coach to come in with a top 2 pick, a chance to go and pick his own quarterback and go, actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to roll with the previous coach's 5th round pick from last year. I just don't see that happening. As I said, if the Browns end up with a top 2 pick, I don't think they're going to be in a position to pass up on one of those quarterbacks, no matter what happens with Shedeur the rest of the way. I think the only way that that Shedeur can avoid that happening is if he can win his a couple of these games and play them out of that. Because, as I said, if they have a top 2 pick, I just don't see there being a chance where they don't take one of those quarterbacks, whether it's this coaching staff or a new coaching staff. But that's where we're at. Obviously, we'll know after the late games, if the Titans can pull out a surprise win, etc. Obviously, the Browns will then jump them, but we'll know more throughout the week where the Browns, lay in terms of the draft position, etc. But that's just kind of where they are at now, and obviously that's my thoughts on it. But as I said, nothing against Shedeur. I'm rooting for him. I want him to play well in these games. It would be amazing if he could be the franchise quarterback and prove that. I just don't think that he was going to have a chance to do so because he was in an unfair situation. Same with Dylan Gabriel, and asking any rookie to play on a bad team in 6 games and prove you're a franchise quarterback is just unrealistic and an impossible situation for anyone, let alone a mid to late round pick. So that's my thoughts on it. That's my thoughts on the game. That's my thoughts on, of course, obviously, going forward with the draft position stuff, etc., etc. Let me know your guys' thoughts. What was your thoughts on Shedeurs' performance? Do you think I'm wrong? Is there something he can do to stop the Browns from drafting a quarterback if they are in position to do so? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit the subscribe button. It's free, but it really, really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing week. Enjoy Loser Monday as much as you can. Enjoy Tankathon, having a scroll on the mock drafts if that's your thing. But most importantly, as always, go Browns and go Myles Garrett.